Welcome to Sky Sports Playmakers. Who we're going to talk to today? We're going to talk to one of our very own. He's usually in the commentary box, whether he's sideline, joins me on the breakdown every single week. It's Junior Mils Muliaina. Well, that's what it says on Wikipedia, but you've just informed me that's not even true. Run me through it. What is it?
Yeah, no, you're right. Thanks, Goldie. I trust Wikipedia, mate, because that's not actually the facts. My name's actually legally Junior Muliaina, and that's the name that's on my passport. And then, obviously, all Pacific Islanders relate to this, or Samoans in particular, the fact that you're named one thing, but then by the time you get back to the village, they start naming you after an uncle for whatever reason that is. So I was named after Malili, and it was my mother's uncle in the village. And from there on, obviously, we moved to New Zealand. 1983, and my parents just enrolled me in school as Malili. So Malili was really what stuck. And while I'm here, I might as well go on how Mils eventuated because, through school and moving down to Invercargill, the tropics, obviously, from Samoa to one tropics to another. I was sort of called Malili, and they couldn't really pronounce my name properly, so it became Malili, Millie. That I was known for a very long time, and then turned into Mils, as in milliliters. Fast forward a few years, and I'd come up to Auckland and play. Obviously, was on a bit of provincial stuff, NPC, and they asked whether whether Malili was my real name and what Mils was, and obviously they couldn't really quite pronounce it then. And I said, "Oh look, just call me Mils." And every single time I went on a Sevens tour, it was the same thing. They called me Mils. My accreditation, every time I turned up, was under Junior, so they didn't really know. But Mils has just stuck. So now I'm in the predicament of trying to change my name. I haven't sort of got around to it. Legally, it becomes Mils Muliaina as opposed to Junior or Malili or whatever it is. So it just sort of shortens it up. I've got many aliases, mate.
Alias is all right, but we can always find you. What about being found, though, for a start, in Invercargill, of all places? You went to my high school, the high school I went to, Cargill High School. It doesn't exist now. But for you, when you think about the rugby journey, how first and foremost, why did the family move to Invercargill, of all places?
Yeah, so my father was a policeman in Samoa. We were put in into a ballot. I think it still goes on at the moment, where you can an opportunity to come over and sort of gain, I suppose, a working visa. My mother's family were predominantly in forestry down in Southland, and also the freezing works. That was very, obviously, a lot of jobs down there, and obviously the oysters as well. So we moved down to Invercargill because obviously we couldn't sort of translate sort of Dad's, being an officer over there to here. He later became a prison officer. My mum a nurse, and that's really how it came about. It was really around jobs, obviously coming to New Zealand for a better life for us kids, and job opportunity really was the prime factor into moving to Invercargill, of all places.
So you run through that. Let's talk about that to a point, though. You're at Cargill High School, and then, let's say, recruited. Well, it was recruited right to Southland Boys High School, and then you end up coming north, and this has been very much in the conversation in rugby in New Zealand, Kelston Boys for your final year of high school. But, I mean, was that a rugby journey, those changes?
Rugby in life, I think. A lot's been talked about that. You're right, I went to Cargill High School, it obviously closed down. So I went to Southland Boys for a year. And yeah, for whatever reason, I suppose when you're at that sort of age, I sort of became a little bit, I suppose, too big for my shoes. My parents had obviously separated as well, and I sort of got myself into a little bit of trouble. My brother went up to Auckland the year before, '97, and went to Kelston just to experience something different. As I said, it wasn't really a scholarship that everyone thinks that I went up there for. I got myself into a little bit of trouble, was in the party scene, and first 15, as I mentioned, just went off the rails a little bit. It wasn't until my brother came back and said, "Oh, maybe I should go and experience, Auckland, get out of the Invercargill a wee bit." Wasn't really expecting to do so. I said yes. On the back end I made a New Zealand touch team that year in '97. So we came up to Auckland, and I was planning on going back to Invercargill. It was around about January, going back to Invercargill and basically pleading to my mother that I didn't want to go to Auckland, because obviously I wasn't prepared to sort of take that big leap. But as it had it, after the tournament, our family friend who I was going to live with, he said that I wasn't returning back to Invercargill, and in fact that I was going to enroll into school sort of a few weeks later. So it wasn't a rugby scholarship, but I think in terms of when I look back at life, and particularly when I was 16, 17-year-old, and some of the things that I was possibly going into, that was a big changer in my life, a big changer in terms of, wow, I was now coming up to Auckland where these guys that looked like men were playing. There was no more rucking. You couldn't ruck, didn't really ruck up here like they did in Invercargill, but it was a life changer. And I suppose one that I look back and I'm very thankful that I had, obviously my brother, our family friend, Matty Solomon, and also, my mother to guide me there, because certainly I wasn't going down a very memorable track, the way I was going down Invercargill.
Did you settle quickly in Auckland? And is that something that's maybe a little bit forgotten when we talk about this debate that goes on about kids changing schools? But for you, it obviously had a huge and positive effect. I mean, do you look at it and go, it did take you some time, though, to get used to living in Auckland?
Oh, it was massive, Goldie, because one, I didn't have my school fees paid for. It wasn't a scholarship. I had to enroll in terms of a student allowance. I was paying rent to the family I lived with. Difference between that and also making new friends. I was fairly fortunate. My brother had done that the year before. So it did take me a little while to get used to. Obviously, when the rugby season rolled around, and there was no guarantees that I was going to make the first 15. I sort of came up here. I didn't really have much of a reputation, apart from the fact that I made some Southern teams and South Island teams, New Zealand trials. That was possibly all I had done. So it was massive. It was massive in terms of my development. But I think more so as a person, as a youngster, and growing up and sort of making really good decisions. But also it sort of put me on track in terms of what was coming in life, in terms of professional rugby and professional football. Certainly some of the things that I had to try and learn and grow up fairly fast. I had some great friends here, and I would later go on the year after. So I initially just came up here for the 1 year, and I did that, loved it. But, Southern came calling at the end of the year, and I figured that was going to be my chance to go back to Invercargill. Got a NPC contract smacked in front of me. Now, we didn't have much. My mother was looking after, was a sole parent at the time. To disclose the figure, it was $10,000. Now, at 17-year-old, it was massive money for me. It was huge. I thought, man, this is a life changer. I could go back home. Fairly naive. I can, buy a house, and we basically won lotto, 10,000. Signing up, I'm going to play NPC for Southern the following year out of school. And Auckland offered me an academy contract, which is some gear and $2,000. So, I mean, it was a no-brainer. I was heading back. But I made a decision. I sat down with Matty. We made a decision about the pros and cons about doing that. As much as I sort of thought at the time that I was going to regret it. It was big. I was going to make the an NPC team. I was going to play against men now. I was ready to go. We made the decision to stay in Auckland, and I've never looked back. And again, if I hadn't had those times where I came up to Auckland, if I'd made that decision in the back end and been down in Invercargill and not been ready to sort of step up and I suppose live life faster than what I expected, then I don't think I would have made that decision. I think I would have been in Invercargill, settled in, and possibly lived a life down there on $10,000. And who knows what I would have got into, given what I'd been up to in my school years.
Well, I find that hard to believe in Invercargill, to be fair. I don't know how much trouble you can genuinely get into. Oh, obviously, you found some. I'm not sure where. But if you start then thinking about that journey with age group rugby, playing in New Zealand 19s, Colts, those sort of teams, at the same time you're in the Auckland rugby environment, I mean, that was a very different time for Auckland rugby there because they were high-flying, right? I mean, they were competing for titles every year. That was a unique place to be playing. What was that environment like to develop your game?
Oh man, it was amazing, because it's sort of, these are your childhood bloody heroes. You're sitting down there in Invercargill when you're seeing these guys on TV, let alone being able to sort of rub shoulders with them, or even walk into a changing room where you initially walk in there and they haven't got a clue about who you even are. And here you are sitting there, you probably know, you know everything about them. Your Joe Ali Vanderis, your Ronnie Clarks, your Michael Jones of the world, and you're rubbing shoulders with these guys who've won titles year in, year out. You've got a manager and Sean Fitzpatrick, who's an absolute legend, JK as well. But it was on the back end also of sort of transitioning into that sort of professional era. So you still had that sort of element of the amateur days and the history that came with it. But certainly as a youngster going into an environment like that where standards was fairly high, but also mixing it up with the stuff off the field as well. I was really fortunate enough as well to be able to experience that. I probably experienced it a little bit too much. But certainly, to rub shoulders with those childhood heroes was something, a guy from Invercargill couldn't even, imagine it, or let alone dream that he was actually doing. So I loved it.
So at what point then, when you're starting on that path that you're talking about, and you're in those environments and you guys are playing and winning titles, and did you start thinking to yourself, you know what, or did someone say to you, you're good enough to be an All Black? Did you believe it? Did you think you would get there? And as All Black number 1033, that's the start of playing 100 test matches for New Zealand. That's an astonishing number. But was there a moment when you are in those environments you go, maybe the goal's changed?
Yeah, and like, I hate to harp on about sort of, coming into roadblocks and, being on this sort of, on this path. But rugby isn't about that. It's not always plain sailing, and it probably took a few, instances off the field for me to realise that, and to grow up fast again. Obviously, realising, what I was in. I kind of just went along with the flow. I got to a stage where, I was happy enough. I made teams, although, we went through a sort of tough era in terms of Auckland rugby and also the Blues. I was kind of just prepared to. I was there. So the next step of becoming an All Black, I don't think I actually realised that until a few things off the field. And really, that was when I sort of sat back and I was kind of like, far out, where am I actually going with this? Let's just reset some goals. I'd come back from winning a Commonwealth Games gold medal, at the age of 21. And then at that stage, I thought to myself, okay, well, I need to really reestablish where I am and set some goals and go about my work there. It's a hard one. And I know guys always say, it's their dream. Yeah, it is their dream to be an All Black. And I get that. And, I've always wanted to be an All Black, in terms of, when I was probably about 6 or 7. But when you're in it, you don't actually realise the next part you need to take to become that, and the realisation that it can. And then until you sort of sacrifice a few more things, you got yourself there, but you really needed to sacrifice even a bit more to be able to be in that environment. And once you're in that environment, they often say it's harder to get out. But the work to try and get in there was huge, and certainly some, off the field things that I'd done had probably prompted me to re-establish or reevaluate where my life was going, but also, what I wanted to do and the drive that was going to be needed to be able to make those goals.
You've glossed over that. You've glossed over winning a gold medal at the Commonwealth Games for sevens. I mean, you think about having what you've saying, done everything you've done, but not maybe having everything you need organised off the field to then take that next step in the 15s game. I mean, what did a Gordon Titchens, as a coach, when you're in a sevens environment, surely the pressure and the disciplines needed to perform in his regime, I suppose, gave you an idea of what it would take?
Oh, huge. And funnily enough, I came out of school and I was 18. I actually played for Mils Samoa. And those are the times when the rules had changed. Hadn't quite changed over yet. So I played a couple of tournaments for them, went to Argentina and also Uruguay. And then I didn't end up getting selected on the way back, but I'd played against the likes of Russia and all that. And so coming out of school and being named in the Monday Samoa team to play those tournaments was huge. Later on, a few months later, when I hadn't got selected, I went to a tournament in Taupiri, and that's when Titch approached me, and said, would you like to come to camp and have a crack at the New Zealand Sevens team? And I was actually quite shocked. And then so I went along, did the tournament, and I made the team. And thankfully enough, because of the eligibility rules, it enabled me to not only that, but later on also allow me to become an All Black, because I wouldn't have, just because I just missed that mark. I think I was 18, and the sign-off mark was 19. But I learned some massive things, like I always loved to train. I think it was one of my hardest things that I always prided myself on. But this was a different level. You'd learn nutrition, what not to eat and what you could and couldn't eat, but also team environment, the small environment that you're in, and how great that sort of was. We won a World Cup, obviously. We won a few IRB titles, but also the Commonwealth Games was something really, really special. But it was tough. Those were tough days because, man, you worked your butt off. You had lost 10 kgs in a week, and all you really wanted was the next step. Everyone kept wanting, although you loved the tournaments, I think it was like $2,000 a tournament. So fairly good. It was all right money, but you worked your butt off. So everyone wanted to sort of the next step was Super Rugby, and that was a big jump. So you're looking around about 15 to 20 grand, and the big step up to 60 odd grand. Although money wasn't the driver, in terms of where you wanted to go in goals, that certainly was the next step. But I think it laid a foundation for me, and Sevens did, in terms of the discipline that you really needed to have to suppose succeed in the next level. And some of those things that I picked up, I still live to today, like in terms of your training, although even though I should really give it up, but some of those disciplines and food and things as well as sort of leading me into life after rugby, which has been fantastic.
We know what to do, right? I mean, that's the thing, is we know what to do with ourselves. Challenge nowadays is actually having the disciplines to do it. And every so often, maybe a lockdown helps in some ways, the training, but unfortunately, the consumption as well can be a little bit tough. All right. Okay, so let's think about this, though. You go from winning gold medals and being part of a champion New Zealand Sevens team. Then all of a sudden, you get to play a test match for the All Blacks on the back of winning a Super Rugby title for the Blues. I mean, are you thinking at this point, you know what? And you've just talked about you are getting remunerated and you're a full-time professional. Are you thinking at this point, can it get any better?
Well, I came into the squad. Man, it was awesome. It was, it's everything you could imagine, coming in there. But the next thing was really, when you're coming as a youngster back then, you're waiting your opportunity. You're waiting your turn because this guy's in front of you now. I had... Leon McDonald was the incumbent. He was the fullback, and so he had been a little bit injured. He had been injured, I think, from the final. So the first game really was Dougie got to play at fullback. So I knew I was still a few players behind in terms of where they were at. And obviously when Leon returned, that would be his. So when my opportunity came, I knew I had to be ready to go. It was always sort of that, like when they always say, when you get a chance, you've got to make the most of it. And I knew that leading into that. That was going to be my next goal when I made the All Blacks. I was in the environment. I knew I had, Leon was in front of me, because a lot of people were mistaken the fact that I was the one that took Cully's place when, I wasn't actually. It was Leon was the incumbent. So I was on the bench. But I knew in the back of my mind that if I ever got a chance to get on there, we played the English and then the Welsh, and I just took it, So we played really well. I knew I had to do my job right. I didn't want to go out and do anything extra and special. I just knew when you're in an environment and in a team that guys, all they need to do is do their job. That's all I needed to do. And as soon as it sort of came up, I was lucky, and in terms of, hey, I had the drive. I knew I had an opportunity. Leon was still injured, and I didn't want to give it back to him.
Yeah,
I didn't
of course.
want to give him the chance to be able to come into an environment and to come in and get an opportunity, because if he got it, he'd obviously be vying for the same thing. Now, times have changed a little bit now with the rotation, but when I first started, I knew I wanted that, and my driver now, my motivation was I didn't want to let that jersey go, and so every time I went out there, I had to be at my best, and without even knowing it, I was now actually driving myself from within without even realizing that I was already setting goals within myself, and I suppose it just eventuated from that, and it kicked on from that, and then later on, I suppose when there was a little bit of competition, I always put myself in Leon's or in my shoes when I was there, when I was biting at the heels. The motivation that these young guys would have, and that was part of my drive. But it took steps to be able to get to that. Certainly at the start, as soon as I got it, I didn't want to let it go, and that's kind of what happened.
And that was definitely a mindset even when I came into the All Blacks. Very, very similar. The fact that you didn't want to give someone the opportunity. Reserves never got to get on the field when I played. Never got a chance. I sat on the bench for a few games earlier on in my career for the All Blacks, and I never took my tracksuit jacket off. I got to watch guys, and like you say, when you get that opportunity, you've got to take it. If you look at that career, though, in the All Black jersey, there are a number of disappointments. And the World Cup, and I was part of the disappointments in 95 and 99, all of a sudden the driver becomes about winning a Rugby World Cup. When you look at that team in 2003, was it good enough? Should it have done that a little bit better like we should have done in 99? Should the 2003 team done better?
Absolutely. We should have done better. I think, man, we won the Bledisloe Cup back. We had a good young team. We got complacent. I think that's kind of what happened. I definitely was what happened. We had a little bit of a scare against the Welsh, and that should have really kicked us up the backside and thinking, man, we can't afford to be able to go into these next games. But we kind of just went along with it. We kind of just went along with the flow. It's, we didn't accept, hey, this is a really good chance now to reevaluate where we were, because we were successful. We'd killed teams in terms of, the Tri-Nations, South Africa, the Wallabies. So we sort of had that arrogance that, we could possibly turn up and still win. And in big time moments, when you're playing for that one-off game, the young side, naive, little moments are massive. And when you got experienced players that you're playing against, the Gregans, the Mortlocks of the world, they thrive on those moments. And so nothing else, when they say it doesn't really matter, whatever form that you lead into that Rugby World Cup, it doesn't mean jack, because those big moments are what you need to win when you want to win a Rugby World Cup. So we should have done better. I honestly believed, we had the team to be able to go all the way, but we didn't because of that fact. We're naive. We were complacent in terms of possibly leading into that game. We thought we could play an expensive game. We could play an expensive game. We just didn't know how to mix it up. But in terms of the aftermath afterwards, I think because that was my first year and I was only 22, 23 years old, it didn't hurt as much as what it probably should have, because I was so young and naive, and although and that was possibly because I knew 4 years down the track I could still be around to actually really give it another crack. And as I said, don't get me wrong, it did hurt, but not like it did in 2007, because leading into that was so massive. But the 2003 team, that was a special team, and a lot of those guys, went on to win 2 World Cups. That's how good this team was. But if I look back at that game against Aussie, we're definitely complacent, and it just goes to show, what they say, that form doesn't matter when it comes to Rugby World Cups, because what you do in every single game counts.
Yeah, and there's a familiarity what you're talking about, given the fact I felt the same in 95 because I was young and we had young players, and you're thinking, okay, I'll wait till the next one, it's just around the corner. Yeah. So you don't realise the disappointment at the time. Particularly, we felt as though we were the best team in South Africa. '99, we did let ourselves down, and maybe that's where we felt. Maybe that's when we were that complacent side because we knew we were good enough. We were maybe expecting to go on and go a little bit deeper. Before we talk 2007, though, you make a shift. You go down State Highway 1 and you go and move from the Blues to the Chiefs. And that's a different environment. That's maybe the enemy in some ways. It is the enemy, and you still haven't decided which jersey you'd like to wear. But in reality, though, what did that do for your game, and how different was that environment?
Oh, way different to because don't get me wrong, like it was a different environment because they were seen as the underdogs. They were constantly seen as the underdogs down in Chiefs country and Waikato because of the way Auckland had dominated them over the years. They had a chip on their shoulder, talented players, but also a relaxed environment. So the environment was a little bit different in terms of, we had a great environment up north, but I suppose logistically, guys are living out south, guys are living over the shore, out west. So you don't really tend to sort of, come together. Down there, you're just around the corner. So in terms of the camaraderie and the team culture, it was awesome. We just weren't performing on the field. I went down there, and what it did, it really emphasised my leadership. I was never one... I wasn't really born, they say you're born a leader. I wasn't one of those sort of guys. I was prepared just to do my job and, have someone else there. But it wasn't until you sort of picked up little wee things and the All Blacks that, I actually became a better leader going down State Highway 1 and being in that environment and actually trying to change the mindset down there to become, a champion team. And I absolutely loved it. And that's why I'm constantly sitting on the fence these days, because I love my days with Auckland, but I also, thoroughly enjoyed my time down in Hamilton as well, because it just changed. I was sort of probably an established All Black in some ways there. I've been this, for the last 3 or so years. And I needed another kicker as well. I needed something to motivate me. And I know there'll be people saying, you should be motivated every day. You are. But, every now and then you need that extra little wee bit to go, hey, man, this is what's going to get me through. I need an extra challenge. And my challenge really was to step up my leadership roles and coming down to Hamilton and sharing some of that with some of the youngsters. And that's certainly what sort of evolved as I did my time down there.
You show me anyone in a job or who's got responsibilities every single day who brings it like that. There was always going to be challenges. You talk about it, say, you're always grateful and you're thankful for the opportunities you're getting and the lifestyle you get to live. But at the same time, it's taxing, it's challenging, it's mentally and physically demanding, and you can't always be up. And I went through lulls myself in terms of that. How committed you need to be and. How much time to time mentally it is difficult. And, we're seeing more and more now why the leadership groups have had to grow and you've needed more people to take responsibilities. Had it grown enough, though, by 2007 in the All Blacks, given, the disappointments of that tournament and the nature of which the All Blacks, with so many great All Blacks like yourself, when that slips by in a quarterfinal where and I experienced in the semi-final where you are expected to win. I mean, was that what was that moment like for that group?
Oh, mate, I probably only just, got over some of that because we went into that in 2000. We had a great team. We built so many, aspects of our game, particularly our mental game. This is 4 years of hard work, of hard grind in terms of that was the end goal. We'd won stuff, we'd sort of went to the Lions in 2005. This was all built around 2007. So that was the end goal. We had a majority of the team that had come back from 2003 was selected. This one really hurt. We're I suppose you're a little bit more mature. I was 27. Possibly not another one left in me, given the age and where I was at in New Zealand rugby. But then just the way we folded And when we look back, it's always, in hindsight's a great thing. But we always sort of challenged ourselves to, there was many aspects that we challenged ourselves over the years leading up to that we thought that were nailed. But the old beast, when you want to get back out there and play and be part of the semi-final or the quarter-final, that sort of crept up on us. We said we're a great team, and it didn't matter who was out there, but there was a lot of things that we didn't possibly tick off, or we weren't really, I suppose, aligned up with in terms of sacrifice and things like that. Our game plan, we went in there with trying to change things up, probably overthought the past and sort of touched on the past too much, that we needed this whole new game plan. And so while we're training this whole new game plan for 4 or 5 weeks leading into the quarters and the semis or whatever it was, that will come out in the semi-final. Well, there's no use training that sort of stuff if you don't make it, because we spend all our time doing that, only to confuse ourselves. The rotation bit, that possibly for me was really hard to take, because I always wanted to play fullback, but I was sort of stuck in that role of, they wanted me to be at centre, and they're two very different positions, physically and mentally, in terms of what you have to do. So, one, it was huge with the fact that we lost, but two, I took a lot of that sort of burden on, because it was kind of like, man, here I was in the big stage. I was given this centre role, which in the back of my mind, if I was really going to be honest, I didn't really want to play there.
We've had a few 15s, Mils, who I don't think wanted to play there. I think that's something we've gone through the process of, and I must admit, like you say, it was it almost like we'd overthought every World Cup after, say, 95. Like we got ourselves into this place where if we do what we do good enough and well enough, we'll be world champions again. And saying that, I look at 99 and I go, look, 20 minutes of rugby, it can disappear. And France have done that with so many teams. Let's transition this then, though, from what happened in 2007. And you just mentioned it, not knowing whether you'd make 2011. And before we talk about that, in terms of what happened to you in that tournament and the team obviously winning, but were you stretching it out? Did you feel as though you're stretching it out? The magic number for outside backs of the All Black in some ways is about 28. You don't make it too far past. That evidence is there. Did you feel as though I'm dragging this out right to the end? Because you weren't going to be old. You weren't going to be an old man. And experience counts.
Oh, absolutely. I felt that, and I had a pretty quiet season too. In terms of, I had an awesome 2010. I came back from injury. It spiked me up in terms of how I played in 2010. At 2011, I sort of, gradually got over a couple of injuries, and I was constantly felt like I was on the back foot. And 31, you got a young sort of, magical player in Israel Dag that's, nipping at your heels. But I probably was stretching it a little bit. And it's certainly going into that tournament, I kind of picked up a few other injuries, and I battled to get to 100, to be totally honest. And in the end, I went into the quarterfinal with a torn pec, and then broke my shoulder. So it was, if I look back, I'm very grateful that I actually made it to that sort of 100 mark. But certainly it makes it a lot sweeter when you're in part of an environment that has finally won. I was really satisfied. Like, I went into 2011 knowing that at the back of my mind, if I wasn't going to get selected, all I was, and this, it's easy to say now, but it definitely was. I would be happy if I was on the bench or if I wasn't playing, as long as we lifted that cup. That's all that really mattered, because it was on the back end of 2007, also the disappointment of 2003, and that's what really happened. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I got to be part of it, but also the magic of holding that cup up was just something that I was really, really grateful for.
Well, you retired during the tournament, right? After the injury had happened in the quarters. Is that the way you'd said, look, that's it, I'm done? And did it feel like an ending for New Zealand rugby? I'm assuming you had a couple of swigs out of the Webb Ellis Trophy over the couple of days as we paraded it around New Zealand.
Oh, it was a good week, mate. I'll tell you that. So it was awesome. But I had to go to Japan, so I'd already signed up to go to Japan. I went over there, did 3 seasons. but I still had that sort of competitiveness in me. Like I didn't really expect what I got in Japan. It wasn't as physical. It was somewhat easier. And so, and you weren't really selected all the time based on your ability, more because how many foreigners were in the team and how many you're allowed. So I had a bit of competitive edge in me. I thought I could come back to New Zealand, but the game had changed. The game had just changed so much in those 2 years that I was gone that there was no way I could end up probably, I felt like I was, back in 2011 where I was constantly chasing these young guys. And so, different kettle of fish then.
So the overseas club carousel, that's the not quite knowing when to hang them up. I'll hang them up in New Zealand, Japan, Ireland, Italy, a little wee. Was there a taste of the US in there as well? Yeah, I mean, was this just, right, I want one last tour. I'm such a good tourist. I need to continue this on for as long as I possibly could. And if anyone asked, you were like, yep, I'm up for that?
No, in the US, I got to the stage where I knew, mate, I'm just signing just to go on a holiday. Napa Valley was calling, and we could go around and live in San Francisco, and have I think it was 6 months. Joe and I sort of travelled around a bit, and before we came back and settled back in New Zealand. So it was really the end of the career. I got sick of it. I was kind of over it really when I was in Italy, at the back end of Italy. I mean, the body was okay. I probably could have pushed out another couple, but mentally, I just had enough. I'd had enough of following the guy in the same uniform as you on the bus, the meetings, just that aspect of it. And, I was ready to come back home and, begin the next part of my life. It was just, I was really excited about life after rugby. I know a lot of guys don't actually know, but I kind of had a plan, and I couldn't wait to do that, and it had nothing to do with rugby, but I sort of set different goals, and that was really what I was sort of looking forward to. Have the Napa Valley and holiday, and then come back and have 3 or 4 months off before I sort of ripped into it.
And is that maybe because when you did start, yes, you were young, but there was still that transition, there was still that amateur, it was professional but not fully professional, and so the discussions and I'm ready to move on, and I'm excited about the next part of my life. Was that, like you've just said then, when you know, right?
Yeah, man, absolutely. I knew, like, I was ready. I was like, I can't even now. I just know apart from the odd 1 or 2 sort of charity games, I've just got no ambition to put my rugby boots on other than to kick the ball around.
No ambition to make a tackle or hit a ruck. That's what you've got no ambition to do. You talked about playing touch. I'll go out and have a run around, throw a ball around. But I don't want anyone running into me, and I don't want to run into anybody else. I mean, that's pure and simply, right? I mean, but you have played the odd game, and we see it still there, but. Like you say, that's the thing, right? I just don't want to do that to myself anymore. You talk about this journey though. You had a plan. So what was it when you come back, life after rugby?
Oh, it's crazy, because when you're in it, they say, man, opportunities always come. Guys talk about opportunities that might evolve. I wanted to be a chiropractor. I came back and I was going to study for 4 years. So I went into my first year at AUT to get my prereqs. And I had no idea what was about to come. Like, it was kind of like that was going to be it. I started my own business once I finished sort of studying and go into that chiropractic. And that was on the back end because, I had some experience in it in terms of chiropractors fixing me was a player. And during my first year, obviously Sky and Scotty Stevenson said to come on and maybe do some shows, and I was kind of like, it was pretty good. You had an appearance fee. I wasn't getting paid anything. I had a student loan, my first student loan ever. So I thought, I wasn't really into the media scene. I said, okay, I'll give it 3 shows, and I did 3 shows at the time. And then there wasn't really no stop. Amazing enough, it wasn't really a 3 shows. Thanks, see you later. I just keep getting, the emails in terms of, here's the call sheet and things like that. And I kind of went, oh, it's pretty good. And his life as a student, getting a bit of extra money as well from Sky, which is fantastic. Yeah. And it kind of just, from then on, I was really fortunate. It was, Sky put a contract in front of me, something that I never thought would ever happen. And I kind of just went with it. I sort of thought, I sort of sat back and reevaluated my goals and sort of what that looked like. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, talking about rugby as much as I thought I wouldn't. I really enjoyed every now and then you give an opinion. I enjoy sort of saying that. And so, yeah, came on board and been here ever since. So I've always had a knack of getting on the housing stuff. So my friend, good friend of mine at school, he'd always wanted to start his own mortgage advising company. So I kind of jumped on that as well. We did our papers accreditation at the time while I was doing the Sky stuff, because I still wanted to do a little bit with my brain. So we did that, and at the same time, it sort of just it worked out really well. So life after rugby is awesome. I work for a great company in Sky. I'm part of a team also that I contract out to a Halo Sport Management, and I've also got my own business that we've been running for the last 3 years, which is it's pretty tough at the time with how things are going with COVID, but exciting as well. So. And the great thing about it is, I'm still involved in terms of rugby, with the management side and also with Sky, but also I've got a breath of fresh air in terms of the financial advisory role that we have. And it's just great. I've got a really good balance, busy with the young family, but I just absolutely love it. And these days, it's crazy, Goldie, because these days where, yourself as a rugby player, you have a crap game and, you come back home and, you beat yourself up. But the next day you can go out and fix it. You can go out and fix it by having a really good training day or having an awesome game. In business, you can't. You can't just go out there and run and go, oh, man, I've had a great session there, because I'm sitting here now at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and all that stuff is in your head. It's now in your head, and your emails, having to make sure that you tick all that off. So now, I sort of had to go around and trying to find a plan about that. And so there's so many similarities in terms of what I've learned from rugby that have now transformed or transitioned into business life. And it's so true what they say when you're in an all black environment. It's so true what they say in terms of, there's similarities between rugby and business. There's goals, there's goal setting, there's leadership opportunities, working with people and being a good person. But also, how do you reevaluate yourself? And some of the skills that I've learned in rugby has transitioned me into business, and I'm grateful. I'm really sort of I'm lucky to have that. And it also excites me, which is something that's awesome.
Everyone's got a post-career crew. They've got a crew. You've got a group of players. It's not everybody, because when you're in teams, you don't end up, you're mates with everyone, but you're not close mates with everyone. So for you, who is it? Who are the guys that on a regular basis you'll catch up and have a beer with, and you'll reminisce, and normally you'll probably get up to some of that mischief you were talking about when you were younger? Who are those guys? I've got a fair idea who a couple of them might be, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, everyone just presumes all your best mates are your rugby friends. All my best mates are my school friends, like my mates from Kelston, and we catch up on a regular basis and have a good laugh about the good old days, because they've been awesome. We talk about the times where I've said no to their parties and things. So they're my really good friends. If we talk about the rugby guys, obviously, Beaver comes to mind, because he's a really good mate. My time in Waikato has been fantastic. So he's right up there. But also, my good friends, Ma'a is always pretty special. It's guys that are still playing, with Isaiah Toiava and that. But I think Beaver probably tops the list. And if I've got to think about sort of the guys that I've really sort of catch up with, or try to catch up with on a regular basis, and have a couple of bevies.
Mate, I've been enlightened. I've really enjoyed this catch up and chat, because you've been through so much, and to have played 100 Test matches from the All Blacks, I think is a phenomenal achievement. And the fact, like you say, you have challenged yourself. Mate, we've come a long way from Invercargill, right?
Oh, mate, think about it.
We've come a long way from Invercargill.
Oh, mate, it's a great place, and like you say, man, I think you turned up at Tweedsmuir. You inspired me when I at Tweedsmuir. It was for Kiwi Sport at that time, and I won an award. So I was gutted I didn't get to meet you there. But certainly when in having, I suppose, going to school there as well, then going on to Cargill and what you did there, like you don't realise it as a kid that you do influence some. You influence youngsters, and when they come from places like Invercargill, be it small or not, you have that connection with people down there. And Inga came down and visited me, so it was an All Black, and man, your expectations of guys and that you want to aspire to when you meet them, you do have that sort of rub off effect. And like you say, Invercargill is a great place. There's some great human beings down. Jimmy Cowan, always got to remember him. Obviously Marshy, he's on the Sky team. There's some great people down there, and you're right. It's a hell of a place, a great place with great people.
Absolutely. And the great thing about when you go around the country, if a Southlander moved away from Southland, they're the first to come and introduce themselves as a Southlander. And that's something I love. And I know well and truly, would do the same. Yes, Samoa, Junior Muliaina, that's it now. I don't know where Mils is going to come out of. It's not the genuine article. Either get your name changed or we've got to talk about something else or call you something else. Mate, it's always a privilege. Great to catch up. You've obviously got plenty of work in front of you to do. Mate, we'll see you on the breakdown on Monday night.
Thanks, Goldie. Good on you, mate.